Good morning and a warm welcome to each and everyone present here. I am Father Francis, Principal of XITE College. It is my joy to welcome Professor Gangadhar Panda, Vice Chancellor of Kolhan University, Dr. Shakila Shamsu, the Drafting Committee Member, MHRD, Professor Sonjharia Minz, Vice Chancellor of SKM University, Father Nelson, Faculty XLRI and the Chairperson of the session, professors, principals, and my colleagues and participants. It is in the midst of rising pandemic that you and I are experiencing a transition in the areas of social, political, economic, and education. Today, we are here to deliberate on the National Education Policy 2020 issues and implications for higher education in Jharkhand. In paper, the NEP aims to transform India's education system, both in quality and quantity, which requires restructuring the existing education system from elementary to higher education in both rural and urban India. Keeping this in mind, we will be discussing on the challenges we face in Jharkhand to transform our state into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society. Thank you very much. Now I request Father Nelson to chair the session. Over to Father Nelson.
Thank you, Father Francis. Welcome everyone to this very important and a very interesting topic, very vibrant topic of discussion, which is going on a lot of on different forums. And this is very important because when we read the education policy, it has a lot of insights, a lot of challenges, and I think that is what the speakers today are going to talk to us about. Let us not waste time, and let me first of all invite Professor Sushmita Sen to introduce Professor Gangadhar and continue with the session.
Thank you, Father Nelson. Good morning to all present. Today, this is my immense pleasure to introduce the dignitaries present with us for this webinar. Dr. Gangadhar Panda, Vice Chancellor, Kolhan University, Chaibasa, with us as keynote speaker. He holds MA in Sanskrit from the Vikram University, Ujjain, and he has completed his PhD from Rashtriya Sanskrit Sansthan, New Delhi. He has served many prestigious institutions before joining Kolhan University. He worked as Vice Chancellor of Sri Jagannath Sanskrit Vidyalaya. He has received many prestigious awards. Few of them are Grivana Vidyaratna Award, Amrit Bhasha Samman, Vishisht Sanskrit Seva Purashkar, Kalidas Vikram Puraskar, etc. He has written many books and he also written many research papers in national and international journals. Thank you, sir, for being with us today. Now, today's topic for the webinar is National Education Policy. And we are lucky to have today as speaker none other than the person who was involved in the framing of National Education Policy Committee. Dr. Shakila Shamsu ma'am, we are so happy to share this platform with you today. You have served in the Department of Higher Education, MHRD, and also as the nodal officer of the flagship of the scheme of National Mission on Teachers and Teaching. She held senior position OSD for the 12th Plan MHRD, and she was Joint Advisor of Education Planning Commission. Her core areas covers education, planning and policy making, teachers education, ICT enabled learning, open and distance learning, etc. Her academic career expands over 39 years, out of which 14 years she has served the Government of India. She holds PhD degree in education and she is gold medalist from the University of Mumbai for her master degree. She has written a number of articles in international journals and she also delivers her speech as a keynote speaker in many conferences also. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us. And next we have Dr. Sonjharia Minz. She is the Vice Chancellor of Sidhu Kanhu Murmu University, Jharkhand. She has completed her MPhil and PhD in Computer Science from Jawaharlal Nehru University. She worked as an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science, Madurai. She has worked in Kamraj University as an assistant professor as well as in Barkatullah University, Bhopal as an assistant professor. She published several research papers in national and international journals. In 1992, Dr. Minz joined JNU as an assistant professor and later on promoted to professor. She also worked for underprivileged and Dalit students, and she also became president of JNU Teacher Association. Today, she will be addressing issues and implications of national education policy. We all welcome all the dignitaries. Now, over to Father Nelson.
Professor Gangadhar Panda, welcome, sir, and we start your keynote address now.
Father Nelson, the chairman of this webinar, and our main speaker, Dr. Shakila Shamsu, the member of the drafting committee NEP 2020, Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, and respected Madam Professor Sonjharia Minz. I welcome you to our university because, as you know, XITE, one of the best affiliated college under this Kolhan University. Being the head of the family, I welcome you all. Then Father Francis, who is behind the screen and organizing this webinar. And I am happy to get myself assembled in this wonderful seminar, which is befitting and a contemporary subject, and perhaps many organizations are holding seminars with regard to its implication. That is why I welcome the authorities and the chairman and the principal of XITE College for arranging this seminar. I will not take much time because other experts are there. Only I will say some bullet points what I have felt about this NEP 2020. So I am going to tell the main features of NEP 2020. That is, in this education policy, 10+2 structure is almost dropped. New school structure, that is 5 plus 3 plus 3, 4. 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system has been introduced. Up to 5, there will be preschool. 6 to 8, that will be middle school. 8 to 11, that will be high school. Then after 11th, that is post-graduation, that will be graduation or UG. any degree shall be of 4 years. This is the feature. And 6th standard onwards, vocational courses will be there. Students can opt the vocational courses. This is a new thing. 8th to 10th, students can choose subjects. And in graduation level, there will be major subject and minor subject. In higher education will be governed by one authority, by one agency. UGC and AICTE will be merged. All universities, including private, shall have one grading pattern and rules. New teacher training board will be set up. Same level of accreditation to any college will get autonomous rights and funds. New basic learning for parents to teach their work, that is from 3 to 6 years. Then multiple entry and exit system will be there in the course. A credit system for graduation. All school education should be of 2 semesters. The syllabus will be reduced to core knowledge of any subject. Then emphasis on practical and application of knowledge than theory. Then graduation level, first year will be basic certificate, second year will be diploma, and third year will be full certificate, and fourth year he will get the main certificate. All graduation course of the university will be governed by single authority with the capping of each course. So these are the main features of the new education policy 2020. Then before telling something, I will tell some history. We have to peep into the history, what happened earlier. Before the independence, kindly obey the instruction given by the chairman that they should be they should mute so that this echo should not come. Then prior to that, when India got independence, the first commission was set up in 48, that is Higher Education Commission, and under the chairmanship of Radhakrishnan, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. And on the recommendation of which the University Grants Commission was set up, and under the banner of UGC, there are so many universities. Now we can say in our country, at that time few universities there, now it is reaching to 1,000. Then after that, there is one commission, that is Mudaliar Commission, that was engaged for the upliftment of secondary education, that was set up in 1956. Then after that, in 64-65, Kothari Commission, it has taken a holistic view, and some lacunas were there, but three language formula, that is 10 plus 2 plus 3 system, which was now prevailing, it was under the advice of that Kothari Commission. Then after that, new education policy 1986 it was started, and after that it was vetted, and some energy, some synergy was given to it by the Ramaswamy committee. For that, entrance examination in different field were started. So this is the history how these education commissions have contributed in the field of education, and looking to all these things, this new education policy 2020 has taken the basic ideas from these education commissions. Besides, they have traveled to all part of India, from the Gram Panchayat level to higher university level. They have taken the feedback from all corner. After that, they have made this public, and it was accepted by government of India. Government of India. Now, the main thing, what are the basic things which has been implemented? The bullet point I have already told, and I would like to add something, that is, it has very innovative and pragmatic suggestions are there. And there is flexibility of choices. One can take one subject, after that, after few years, he can change the subject. Previously, it was not there. See, he was only bound to take one subject in after graduation. That means main subject, and 4 subjects were there. But any PG, he has to take one subject. Now, in this system, there is flexibility. Then it is activities oriented than theory based. So this is one benefit. Another, multiple language, 3 language formulas are there, but mainly it will be 2 language, and it all science and mathematics, it will be bilanguage. It will be in English as well as in the maybe in Rashtriya Bhasha, that is national language. However, language option will be there. Then there is, because previously this NAC was giving that whether this modern university have linkage with industries or not. Then it is a revolution. It covers all type of study. Previously it was previously vocational education was there, but it was undervalued. Here we have this system has given more emphasis on our vocational education with value education. This is vocational and value, so that we can understand. It is pedagogy talented, that means creating talent in higher education. There will be higher education institutions integrate in there. So they have now in this policy, they have given more emphasis for teacher education, and they have started integrated B.Ed course for 4 years. In this way, university will be multidisciplinary, and it will have more autonomy to start the courses, and extension opportunity will be there. They can cross their boundaries. They can establish their branches in foreign places also. That means outside to their jurisdiction. So for example, Kolhan University, we have under Kolhan University, we have 3 districts: Purva Singhbhum, Paschim Singhbhum, Saraikela, Karsua. We cannot extend our activities in other places. Of course, we can sign MOU with other universities, but in this system with the due permission of our competent authority, we can also set up our institution in foreign countries, always also in other places of the country where our jurisdiction beyond to our jurisdiction. Then there will be quality research. There will be one research university and National Educational Technology Forum, NETF, will be there. Then it will address special challenges. Then other thing is local and cultural values will be there in our education, so that we should, because our Honorable Prime Minister has told that India will be Vishwa Guru. So how we will be expert in all fields, that is also taken care of in this NEP 2020. Then regulatory system of higher education, that will be there. Work independently with synergy, that will be there. Realizing socio-economic development, that means in 2030, definitely some changes will be there, and there will be central advisory board of education. In this way, I think it has given a new dimension with regard to skill development, because it was all previously we are all theory oriented. So after getting education, whatever that is, it may be MA, MSc, MCom, but they are not getting any livelihood. But here, if skill development and vocational education will be given emphasis, then definitely they will not get, the students will not get the employment, but also they can generate the employment for other people also. So we can say that Atmanirbhar Bharat, the dream which has been dreamt by our honorable Prime Minister, and also we are going to visualize all these things that will be fruitful. With this, I congratulate all of the dignitaries who are our resource persons, and especially Madam Dr. Shakila Shamsu and our Professor Sonjharia Minz Madam to be with us, and they are kind enough to give time, and we will listen to them because they are our resource persons. And with that, also I will not forget to give my thanks from the core of my heart to Father Nelson and Father Francis and all of his team members for organizing this nice webinar, which will be helpful not only to the teachers but also to the students. With this, I conclude. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Now it's over to Dr. Shakila Shamsu.
Good morning, everybody, and namaskar. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gangadhar Pandaji, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Minz, Chairperson of this particular forum, Father Nelson, Dr. Father Francis, Professor Sushmita Sen, who has kindly introduced us, principals and faculty who are assembled here. It's really a privilege for me to address this webinar on the implications of the National Education Policy 20, particularly in the sphere of higher education. The limitation that I may have would only be that its implications from the point of view of Jharkhand, I would possibly benefit better by hearing to Professor Minz and seeing how it could be actually implemented effectively in Jharkhand. But I shared before you a broad canvas of the recommendations, and I'm thankful to Professor Panda for having given a genesis of the education policy making within this country, and also touching upon some of the key features of this policy, and at the cost of repetition, maybe develop on those same features that have already been touched upon by the Honorable Vice Chancellor. So the NEP 2020, as we have said, is the third policy which covers the entire spectrum from early education to higher technical and professional education. But as was rightly pointed out, this is only that it is a third policy, but we've had several commissions like the Radhakrishnan Commission, the Mudaliar Commission, the Secondary Commission, and several committees headed by Professor Yashpal, Professor M.K. Kaur, Professor Anil Kakodkar, Madhav Menon, Justice Verma. I mean, we've seen of committee reports and commission reports which have touched on various aspects of education. But the policies are only three in number, and that is the 68 policy, the 86 policy which got modified in 1992, and the 2020 policy which we declare as being the policy of the 21st century. And the philosophical foundation that went into this policy, other than, of course, the fact that you've already been told that this is one of the most comprehensive, and I may use the word humongous consultations that any policy making exercise may have undertaken, because we started on 26 January 2015 and it got approved on 29 July 2020, good 5.5 years of elaborate exercise of having grassroots consultations, using technology and digital platforms for consultations, having expert bodies to have their thoughts and their views on it. And it actually originated with 33 themes which were identified, 13 in school education and 20 themes in higher education, on which we invited a lot of views from common citizens, from parents, from teachers, and you would be amazed at the volume of suggestions that we got. If we were, and for someone like me who's been there since the inception till today, we would have run into lakhs of suggestions, roughly in the range of something like about 7 to 10 lakh suggestions that had come. It had come through the online platforms, it had come in hard copies to us, there were reports that were given to us, and the micro level grassroots consultations at the panchayat level. It was a humongous exercise because every single village in this country had deliberated upon the themes that we were trying to look at for the new policy. And in this exercise, we had the committee that report which was finally accepted is the third in the line, and no parallel of this kind has taken place at all earlier. Because you had a committee which was set up on 31st of October 2015, headed by the late former cabinet secretary T.S.R. Subramaniam's report, which was not accepted by the government, though it was laid on the floor of the parliament in August 2016. Then we had a ministry internal exercise, some inputs for the draft national education policy. And it is only in June 2017, under the Honorable HRM Prakash Javadekar ji, that this new committee was constituted and which submitted its report on 31st May 2019. And this report itself drew over 2 lakh suggestions. On the basis of that distilled and curated effort, you can see a 484-page document, which is the draft NEP 2019 document, being distilled, being curated, taking into account the feedback that came in, and being made into a crisp, succinct document of 66 pages, which is there before you. Now, the philosophical foundations that underline the policy itself is that there was a UNESCO report of 1996, Learning the Treasure Within, and which tried to put forward an idea of what should learning look like in the 21st century. And it identified 4 critical pillars of learning. Learning based, learning to do, which is activity based and application of knowledge and skills. The third, for sustainability, learning to live together and to live with others, resistance and tolerance. And finally, learning to be, where you talk of the flowering of the individual potentials and the realization of the self potentials, by which the true purpose and the trajectory for which every single individual has been created would be able to move on a path towards excellence. Now, these were the 4 pillars: learning to know, to do, to live with others, and to live together, and learning to be. As a country, we are a signatory to the United Nations goals, development goals of 2030, and which prescribes 17 sustainable development goals. And of these, the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is to provide inclusive and quality equitable education for all and lifelong opportunities, has been the second guiding goal that this policymakers or the committee tried to look upon as trying to give effect to in the policy recommendations that it brought about in its report. Now, these two form the fundamental core of the thinking that went into what the NEP should actually bring about. As a policy, what it seeks to do. And let me also clarify, many people have asked, why did we want to change the existing policy? Let us understand that change is the most inevitable reality that takes place. And it is not that earlier policies, we are all assembled here, an age group that is more than 50, we are all the beneficiaries of earlier policies. But policies have to evolve and policies move in a continuum. But you have to sometimes take a radical break because you find that it is no longer relevant to the purpose that it is. And therefore you need to change. And we don't like being disturbed from the comfort zone that we are, because we are used to a certain system of functioning. And therefore any change is resisted. And resisted, I'm sorry to say, as being a part of the teaching fraternity myself, resisted largely by the teaching community, because we have got so set into our own patterns that we do not like any change. It would require a lot of preparation. It would require us to adapt a lot, but we have to accept that the current policy is meant for the 21st century challenges. It is meant in a society where technology is a major disruptor. It is living in a time when research and innovation are the drivers of change, and therefore we have to have a new education policy so that we empower our students with the right kind of knowledge, skills, and attitudinal changes to meet with the economic challenges and also try to reach global standards. So empowering the student is the key focus of the NEP 2020. Who is the catalyst which will make this possible is the teacher. And therefore, recognizing the strength and the role of the teacher and the respect and the teaching profession has been the second driving force in this particular policy. And all this takes place in an ecosystem of an educational institution, maybe a school, maybe a college, maybe a university, maybe an engineering college, whatever. But it is the educational institution which forms the ecosystem. And these educational institutions should be unique, therefore they should be autonomous, and therefore they should be able to deliver the purpose for which it exists. It cannot just go on doing business as usual and expect that they would create a set of man force or human beings who have good citizens, good human beings with good values, with the right kind of employable skills and the right kind of knowledge to handle the different challenges that are emanating. Now, it is these goals which we have articulated in the 5 goals of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. I'd urge each one of you to actually read the introduction chapter where we have outlined 21 cardinal principles or maybe 22 cardinal principles, starting with the fact that every child is unique and has certain special qualities and talents and potentials. And it is for us to identify, recognize, and nurture that talent so that each one too chooses their own trajectory of growth. At the same time, provide for an environment and educational system which encourages the holistic development of that child. And we have then identified principles of flexibility, the need for critical thinking and cognitive learning, multilingualism, the idea of actually having assessments which are less pressurizing, treat public and private institutions on the same footing, look at all sorts of investment that could come in, and a host of other principles that we have outlined with promoting technology, using online learning, strengthening vocational education, promoting the ODL system to achieve the different targets that we are looking at. So in the time that I am having of about 10 to 15 minutes, given you this background in about 5 minutes, I am just trying to tell you in the higher education scenario, what are the changes, but before moving straight, we looked at the policy from a single continuum. We have not tried to say that each sector is independent. What is peculiar about this policy and unique about this policy is that it has understood the interconnectedness between early learning in ECCE to the learnings that take place in the school education across the 4 stages outlined by the Honorable Vice Chancellor of 5+3+3+4, and how each of these stages, the foundational stage, the preparatory stage, the middle stage, and the secondary stage, are actually interconnected, which impacts the learning at the subsequent levels and which is appropriate to the brain development of the child and therefore needs to be moved in a very scientific evidence-based learning paradigm. And therefore the 5+3+3+4 is not a physical restructuring of the schools at all. It is only a curricular and pedagogical restructuring suited to the learning that is meant for the child, appropriate to the stages of brain development and appropriate to the age by which the ability to assimilate learning takes place in a more enriched manner, and therefore the learning outcomes being improved. So the approach to curricula, the approach to teaching learning, and the approach to assessment, the 3 factors that encompass the learning process, all are being transformed to this new requirement of moving away from a very structured form of learning to flexibility in the choice of courses and a more open kind of teaching learning process where you move away from rote learning to an experiential based learning and a practicum based learning and an application based learning, with allowing the child to choose from multiple courses without demarcating it as curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular, vocational, academic, arts, science, commerce, and so on. Allow the child to take up any courses, any bouquet from a bouquet of courses. And then the assessment cannot test just memory. The assessment will have to be less rigorous. The assessment should be actually able to test the ability of the child to the assimilated knowledge to apply it, and therefore application based, provoking critical thinking, the spirit of inquiry, scientific temper. These are the things, these what we call the 21st century skills. These are the things that we need to empower our student with, because we have recognized that technology being the major disruptor, the kind of jobs that these children may be trying to take up are not even known to us. With artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning, robotics, many things that we have done with our hands, or many things that we used our intellect, is now being taken over by the machines. And the role, therefore, of the student in the kind of job that may come about is something that is most unpredictable, is something that is known, it is unknown, it is uncharted. We do not even know that. So what will hold the child in good stead? The child will have capacities of adaptability, of communication, of collaboration, of dealing with teamwork. At the same time, will have knowledge in many areas, so that according to that, the child or the student in the later years will be able to use that knowledge in the new environment that it calls for. And this is what translated into higher education in the holistic, multidisciplinary education, or nothing else but what we traditionally used to call as the liberal arts education, where sciences, social sciences, languages, engineering, agriculture, pharmacy, medicine, any area of knowledge, including performing arts of music, dance, painting, sculpture, all of it goes to make up a complete human being or a complete individual. And we need not condemn a student because the student is not good in academics to say that they would not be necessarily performing well. Today you find having multimedia, being able to take up careers in the media section, being able to perform in terms of music, in terms of dance, in terms of animation, all these are avenues by which you can have gainful employment. And therefore, the holistic multidisciplinary education of 4 years could be either 3 years or 4 years. And as the Vice Chancellor has already pointed out, with a multiple entry and exit, because in keeping with the concept of lifelong learning, people may choose to do a year of a course, decide to go outside to the world of work, and then come back and rejoin, rather than treating that student as being a dropout, having not completed in a straitjacket the 4 years of study. And this flexibility gives the student the options of exploring not only the world of education, but also combining it with the world of work. And there is evidence to say that students who've had an exposure to the world of work tend to perform better when they come back into the world of education. And therefore, this multiple exit and entry, the greater flexibility and the challenge for states like Jharkhand would be when we say that universities and colleges will have to become multidisciplinary. Are we having the departments for that? And if we are not having the departments, that would have to come through what we had proposed in the policy as HEI clusters. Institutions which could share their resources, which would allow the students to choose their courses from a multiple set of institutions and acquire the credits not only from various institutions, but across also through ODL or through MOOCs. Therefore, the mode of education also has been made flexible. And the question would be, how would you then look at the students' academic core equivalence? There is an academic bank of credit where the student will actually acquire credits and will put all those credits earned into his own depository, which we call will be an academic bank of credit. And equivalence would be decided by the National Higher Education Qualifications Framework. And because of this, we have allowed a 3-year degree student to do a 2 years master's, a 4-year degree student, which is a complete 4 years in bachelor's in multidisciplinary education, to do a 1 year's master. And someone at the multidisciplinary 4-year program, if has taken up a detailed research dissertation, will even be allowed to go in for PhD program directly. So you see, 3 options that we are giving to the student has allowed flexibility in courses, flexibility in the duration, flexibility in the institution and the mode of education, flexibility in the completion time, and all these impact the subsequent postgraduate education and the doctoral education. We declared that and recommended that MPhil should be discontinued because all of us coming from the teaching fraternity know that today it is no longer relevant to have completed an MPhil for admission to a PhD. Neither is MPhil an eligibility criteria for joining in a teaching profession. It has outlived the purpose as an educational qualification. And therefore, we said that let us do away with this kind of a degree which does not anywhere anymore serve any specific academic or even an employment purpose. Now, on the student point of view, we have tried to look at the point of empowering the student with optimal learnings, and which would mean that not just the academic support that is being provided to the teaching learning in the education institution, but also support that may be required from the point of view of counseling that would be required for psychological problems that they face, the kind of, you see, the well-being of a student is not the academic alone. The well-being of the student is the mental well-being, the social well-being, the psychological well-being, at the same time being able to be physically fit also. So all these go to make up, but we want good human beings, respecting the constitutional values, respecting the values of a particular culture within which we live in, because we cannot detach ourselves from the culture to which we belong. So counseling will be a major mainstay, and most critically is the financial support, which brings me to the idea of equity and inclusion. Now, many have criticized this policy in terms of trying to say that the 86 policy talked about the education for the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the OBCs, the minorities, the women, people living in with children with disabilities. It is already recognized, and we have not touched upon reservation only because reservation is already a constitutional mandate. No committee within this country has got the powers to even trample upon the reservation policy. And therefore, it is taken for granted that the reservation policies will continue as they are. Over and above that, the policy has put in a lot of strategies for enhancing the educational participation of people belonging to the marginalized sections by using a terminology that we call socially and educationally disadvantaged groups. In the draft NEP, we had used the term underrepresented groups or URGs. This terminology, when we received feedback, was not well received, and therefore we now changed that to calling it as socially and educationally disadvantaged groups, which looks at all aspects of social and economic backwardness, regional backwardness because of the location, the tribal areas, children with disabilities, urban poor, women, those who are having learning disabilities, those who are vulnerable citizens like in child trafficking or migrant labor, or who are transgenders. All these have been categorized as the socially and economically disadvantaged groups. And we have said that we can have gender inclusion funds, we can have special education zones for those areas which have a concentration of these segments of the population, particularly for tribal areas. And for Jharkhand, we have said in terms of having languages and tribal languages being a major limiting factor, how we can have teachers who can teach in these dialects and these languages while providing for bilingual textbooks. And when we had Shikshak Parv very recently from the Ministry of Education, we had in the school education Dr. Sandhya Pradhan, who talked about 4 languages being taught in the schooling sector. And multilingualism is something that we emphasized because we have said in early ages, children should learn in their mother tongue. That is where they are most familiar with. But that is not to reduce the preeminence of English language. That is not to reduce the preeminence of Hindi as a national language. So these strategies that we talked about. So we have set special education zones, enhanced scholarships, providing study rooms and hostel facilities, any measures that would be needed to enhance the educational participation. And one major area is enhanced scholarships. So scholarships We want it to be actually having an ease in which scholarships can be released, more scholarships being available. And since the policy has said both public and private institutions will be treated by the same norms, we have even insisted that private education institutions will also provide scholarships ranging from the tune of 25 to 50%, and some students can be given complete waiver of fees and a total freeship that is being given if they're meritorious students. Now, on equity and inclusion, these multiple strategies of providing in regional languages, setting up special education zones, providing more scholarships, setting up gender inclusion funds and social inclusion funds, addressing the needs of children who are there in remote backward areas, particularly in what we call aspirational districts, which I'm sure Jharkhand would have a large number of aspirational districts. This word aspirational districts is coined by the Niti Aayog, which was earlier called the left-wing extremism affected districts, which we now call as the aspirational districts. And how can we improve the educational indicators of people who are there in these aspirational districts? So strategies that are not one size fits all, but strategies which would suit to various requirements of different cross sections of the society, different areas of the society, is what this policy seeks to do, because it believed also in the principle of flexibility, and it supports that in the recommendation also, that India being a large, diverse, pluralistic society, you will have to have multiple strategies to address the educational aspirations of people coming from various cross sections of the society. Now, sir had already talked about nationalization. It is, we are living in a world which is very competitive, and competition is not a bad word. Competition which is healthy should be encouraged between students, between faculty, and between educational institutions. And we should also allow for mobility of students, of faculty, and institutions. And in keeping with that, we have put forward the idea of internationalization. NRF, or the National Research Foundation, is the other vertical which looks at quality research and promoting innovation. We have failed to a great extent, even though we have been independent for so long. Our concentration was on consolidation and expansion, and quality research did not really get the due attention. We spend a minuscule 0.6% of the GDP on research. And we have multiple research funding bodies like the DST, the DBT, the DIT, the ICSSR, the ICMR, the ICAR, and so on. While all these research bodies have been doing their work, and we should acknowledge the efforts that they have been doing, we have not really been able to germinate, seed, and nurture research in the university system. And this policy, through the NRF, tries to promote multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary research, not only in sciences and technology, but in social sciences, in languages, in humanities, in Indian knowledge systems, tribal medicine, yoga, all of it together through this body, which will be the NRF, which will try to empower state universities like the Kolhan University to take up research in the state university system. So Jharkhand can now start looking at what are those areas of research which would have implications to improve the quality of life of people living in Jharkhand. Research cannot be esoteric. You cannot go on doing research which is not actually transforming the quality of life. What are those areas in which Jharkhand would benefit from research? And those are the kind of research areas Kolhan universities and other universities in that areas need to take on. Having talked about NRF, I think I missed out on a point that the higher education system in this country is very large and complex. And we use different terminologies, saying central universities, state universities, private universities, affiliating universities, unitary universities, deemed universities, and so on. We have said all HEIs will only be called as university. And there can be three types of universities or institutions or HEIs. There could be research intensive universities, teaching intensive universities, and finally we have said autonomous degree granting colleges. Now on the autonomous degree granting colleges, and XITE being one of the best affiliated colleges, which has been commended by the Honorable Vice Chancellor, and It was a proud moment for Father Francis and his team. It is important to understand that affiliating system will have to gradually be phased out. And we have a country which, as a country, we have 40,000 affiliated colleges. While XITE may be one of the best affiliated colleges, there are a number of colleges which are having unviable numbers and which are actually not offering quality education, because all that they're doing is conducting examination twice a year, and the host university, having about 800 affiliating colleges, is unable to look into aspects of academic quality at all. And therefore, we have recommended that over a period of about 15 years, going up to 2035, to a mentoring and hand-holding by the host university and by the government, both state government and government of India, through graded accreditation, we will gradually move towards empowering the affiliated colleges to becoming autonomous degree granting colleges. And this is a very long process which will actually help the idea that every college is actually to become an autonomous college. But it is not an overnight phenomena. It will evolve over time. It will give a lot of scope for the university to handhold the institution. And idea over a period of 15 years, we would have a more rationalized system of higher education system, where you will have viable institutions with large number of students, as far as possible having the best infrastructure, if not on their own, with a HEI cluster, which will finally have the powers, both academic, administrative, and financial, to be independent bodies. And for that, we have said we will have the autonomous degree granting colleges. Many are concerned what will happen to the rural colleges. Let me be very clear. Our recommendation for talking about degree granting autonomous colleges has a caveat that it will not affect, and we have mentioned that, with concerns of equity and inclusion. Therefore, those which are in those areas, such as the aspirational districts, may not necessarily have to move away from that, but they could become constituent colleges within the larger university. So we have actually taken on board that the idea is not to eliminate the college system, but the idea is to have better colleges, but those which are in such areas which are catering to the requirements of the underprivileged, then we will continue to have them, but in a new form where they would become constituent colleges of a larger university. Now, on the regulatory, on the internal governance and the faculty we have said are no doubt to be given the respect and the service conditions that they can perform best, that they are to be autonomous to decide on the teaching learning processes, but they will have to be accountable for the learning outcomes of the students. Learning outcomes as a measure of accountability is not confined only to school education. It is as much confined, it is as much applicable to higher education also. And therefore, an extended probation through what we call a tenure track system, but continuous provisions for capacity building and academic progression to move on to take up leadership positions, even to go on to become the deans and directors and the vice chancellors, is possible. So for the faculty, we have said energized, capable, and motivated faculty through a very well laid out system of restoring the dignity of teaching profession through continuous capacity and professional development, going to take up leadership positions, and at the same time making them accountable by a system of tenure track appointments, but where they will have continuous incentivization for better performance. This is what we envisage for the faculty. And combined with this, for the internal governance of the institutions, we have said that there would be a very strong autonomous board of governors, which would have eminent educationists, people from industry, people from civil society, parents, teachers, and other stakeholders coming together on this board of governors, which will decide the institutional development plan for that particular institution and where it would like to see itself going in a vision period of about 10 to 15 years. And on the regulatory system, the external regulation, we are aware that Indian higher education system is over-regulated. And we are all the time filling up some forms, Either it is for accreditation, or it is for getting development grants from the UGC, or it is for offering some new programs. We wanted to have a light but tight regulation, and believed in the principle that there has to be separation of functions. You all agree that you cannot have the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary being in the same body. By that same principle, you cannot have funding, accreditation, regulation, and standard setting being done by the same body, which is currently what UGC, AICT, NCT, and all the regulatory bodies are currently doing. The separation of functions therefore led us to the recommendation that we will have 4 separate independent verticals looking after funding. That would be the HEGC, the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, which will take care of the regulation, the General Education Council and the professional standard setting bodies, which will lay down the standard setting, and the accreditation, which will be done by a new body called the National Accreditation Council, which can subsume NAC and many other assessment agencies. And all this under an umbrella body called the Higher Education Commission of India, which will coordinate in case there are disputes between these verticals. So in a light but tight regulatory mechanism, we are believing in the principle of the separation of powers, and we are hoping that the regulatory system will not touch medicine and law, because they've already had the National Medical Commission. Today's newspaper says that it has become a reality. The NMC has become a reality, and so also for the Bar Council of India. But all other councils which are there, the Pharmacy Council and all others, will cede their regulatory powers and become only professional standard setting bodies, looking at the academic standards and laying down what could be the broad curricular outlines. But the curriculum and the detailing of it would be done by the higher education institution. So it is only the framework, but the detailing would be done by the institutions. Now on the finances, we have committed ourselves like the earlier policies of 6% of the GDP. We stand at 4.43. But we have also said that we will not allow for commercialization of higher education. We have said that all standalone institutions would be closed down, particularly in teacher education, and we will all move towards multidisciplinary education. But at the same time, we have allowed for private philanthropy to come in, so that we may be able to top up the government expenditure with the private philanthropy. Ultimately, the policy has believed that public education needs to be strengthened, and government cannot abdicate its responsibility, while recognizing the role of the private sector, while saying that public and private would be treated alike, but while also saying that the private institutions will not be allowed to function as commercial enterprises, and if they do so, that penalties can be levied, and they can also be shut down if they move towards treating it as a commercial enterprise. But finally, to make all this possible, the existing Central Advisory Board on Education, which was created in 1920, but which is a federal body, because that is very important. I must mention that education is a subject in the concurrent list, and therefore the importance of giving powers to the state government to look at this, like we are talking today. Jharkhand will have a kind of an implementation plan, which may be not, which will be not different from the implementation guidelines of the government of India, but we'll have a different strategy. But we'll have to keep up to the broad timelines. Because if we are talking of a 4-year undergraduate program, you cannot have one particular state having it from a date, cutoff date, which is different from the national implementation timeline. But what strategy you may do, and your requirement of mapping your own institutions in the state of Jharkhand, which could be the research university, which could be the university, how many colleges are there which may have to move away to becoming autonomous. These are strategies that you may have to decide. And the Central Advisory Board on Education, which will be a rejuvenated body, will act like a standing education commission to monitor the implementation of the NEP, which will be implemented not overnight, but in a very phased manner, where some academic reforms can start in 2 years. Some of them would take place, which are not just structural, and the regulatory changes that we are talking about within about 3 to 4 years. And we will have a phased implementation with all stakeholders, the government of India, the state governments, all the autonomous institutions, the regulators, the common citizens, each one's voice being heard, just as we did the consultation, and which will, over a period of 15 years, actually try to see whether NEP 2020 by 2035 to become a reality. And maybe it would last till 2040. And you have seen that this is over 34 years. We are hoping at least after 20 years, at least for 20 years, that this policy should become a complete reality, which would transform India to becoming a global knowledge superpower, at the same time empowering the students, rejuvenating the teachers, and reforming and reinvigorating our institutions for the roles that we have envisaged, we call a Vishwaguru. And in this whole exercise, recognizing the plurality of languages, we have emphasized a lot on languages, and maybe if something comes in the questions, I'll try to take it up. But let me stop at this stage. And I extremely am happy to have been invited for this webinar, and it's been a pleasure that I could be a part of this particular interaction. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving the insights or the philosophy behind this entire education policy. Over to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Sonjharia Minz. Ma'am, you are being made the presenter now. If you have slides or anything, you can display.
Thank you very much. I would like to recognize the persistence of Father Francis, who's behind organizing this webinar. I would like to place on record my thanks also to my colleague, Professor Panda, joy to share platform Shakila Shamsu, from whose mouth we just heard the entire document, which we've been trying to read a number of times, but then such a clarity just flew out of her mouth. Thank you very much, also Father Nelson and Dr. Sushmita Sen for the introductory note. And this entire opportunity for extending the opportunity for me to be part of this interaction through in a webinar mode, because this is a very important topic at this given point of time. Thanks to COVID, that without traveling and without much expense of our time and money, we are able to join in this way over a digital platform. And I think thanks to COVID, again, there are so many constructive and productive while we have been confined to our residences, certain other locations, but also we've been able to see the limitations of technology during this period, and probably which give us a way ahead, or also send out the alerts. I would like to thank Father Francis for assigning this topic to me, issues and challenges in higher education, or implementation of higher education, higher education, as it is specified in the NEP 2020, specific to the state of Jharkhand. And although I'm not from the background of education, unlike Professor Shakila, who has a broader picture, as well as who was part of this entire exercise. And it was so evident, Professor Shakila, like the kind of engagement you have had. Maybe there are many members in the committee, but sometimes not all are as engaged. But I guess from your background and your scope of assignments from time to time, we could make out your engagement in even the working on this, not only the draft but then from draft to the document that has come to be. So thank you so much. It was so wonderful to listen to you, and I wish I could just listen to you, because certain questions that I have been having from my document a couple of times, I think they have been demystified in their own way. So thank you so much. I would like to thank all the participants also to have given me this opportunity to interact in a very specific time. I'd like to probably Yeah, to keep some time for question and answer, and probably we could ask hear more from Professor Shakila. I'd like to limit my talk, especially to 20 minutes, and I've eaten up now 4 minutes out of that. I think I'd like to, as it was so wonderful, Professor Shakila was throwing open the challenges that may be specific to Jharkhand. I would like to also place on record my inability to respond to some of them for the reason I have remained out of this part of the country for 40 years and have been in other parts. But it has been again a wonderful opportunity to come back after 40 years and having had experiences of various kinds, and to be also at the helm of affairs of 6 districts of Jharkhand in the capacity of Vice Chancellor, because there are 6 districts which are covered by Sidhu Murmu University, and they are typical, and they're not really atypical like other districts, and they are typical to the state. And therefore, I'm able to look at some of the challenges in their specificity, as well as see if there is any mapping to the generality of the issue itself. Before responding or before bringing out some scenarios, certain things pertaining to the region, I think I would like to, since it was good, I was given to respond to or speak on higher education only as it is, or the provisions for or policy related to higher education in the policy document. I'd like to bring out certain aspects, bullets from the portion on higher education, which also Professor Shakila had mentioned, but I'd like to go back to them because I'd like to respond to those bullets vis-a-vis Jharkhand. Yeah, the multidisciplinarity which has been spelled out, okay, for higher education. I think the word university was actually having a totally dichotomous existence, because the word university indicates everything is coming together, but then this fragmented identities or compartmentalization in terms of departments was actually against the term or my understanding also of the university. So that is one thing which is coming out very clearly, that now the vision is for multidisciplinarity approaches to be there, which gives scope for multiple disciplines if they have emerged so far as disciplines. But so therefore there can be certain challenges, or there should be response, not really challenges and issues, but response to this vis-a-vis Jharkhand. The second thing I want to pick up is the classification of the universities as teaching university and research universities. Okay, so I'm not I'm going to have my own view on this, but that comes out very clearly, right? It would also have a university. Okay. Then the next thing is about the HECI, which has been mentioned there, and Professor Shakila has very beautifully brought out like the 4 verticals about mapping to the functionalities. But likewise, there is something called the National Research Foundation, which has also been brought out as a body to to foster the kind of research, the vision for research that is envisaged. Okay. Then next point I would like to mention is about the imageries which have also which also appear in the document of the policy, such as our ancient spaces of knowledge or knowledge creation, which are our ancient universities. And I'm sure Professor Panda from time to time has been also sharing things in our groups of vice supporters. So bringing some of the historical richness, but then I would respond to this also vis-a-vis Jharkhand in a while. The last point that I would like to pick up is the emphasis of technology, and so in terms of use and integration of technology in education, or broadly towards education. Yeah. So if I may go back to my points, let's consider education. Why has education, does education have the same let's say, value, or is it seen as a same asset or value as it was in the days of Nalanda and are those ancient universities? That's my first question. Okay, now there are two things that I would like to mention. Even prior to Nalanda, I think I'm sitting in a hotbed of this region, which is rich of tribal heritage, tribal, cultural, and traditional heritage. I would like to invoke sitting here, and also even if I was still new, I would have done the same. Don't we have these knowledge systems and the way the knowledge was passed down traditionally in such cultural frameworks? So, one, it is the responsibility of Jharkhand and places, states like Jharkhand, to bring it to the fora, to the table, that if there were parallels or even, I mean, things which we pre-existed, let's say, this, such as Nalanda, etc. So does this policy give space and room for even not only recognizing but working towards bringing out the saliencies of those systems? And therefore I would definitely would like to commit my university to at least try to do an exploratory that does do the tribal knowledge systems and the cultural entire these systems. I don't have the right vocabulary because I come from sciences. Okay, so do they also do they stand the ground? Can they, I mean, can they be also brought not in competition but then in addition? Because our country is a country of diversity. It's another thing that this diversity is taken to the level of inequality. But so therefore, I would try to see. I would like to see the state to be also doing the exploratory as well as then the needful, and especially from the point of view of dignity and identity of such systems. Okay. So that's my first point. The second thing is about the classification of the universities as teaching universities and research universities. Having said that, instead of diversity be considered as the richness of the country, I think it has been used for maintaining inequality or also continuing to perpetuate inequality. Okay, now if this chain of inequality and discrimination does not break, my fear is that this universities, or tomorrow if six university districts of where SKMU is, Sidhu Murmu University is, would have only teaching universities, and they may not be able to achieve anywhere or come anywhere close to being eligible to be a research university, because this is how things operate. Okay, it's almost like saying like दूध का जला छाछ को फूंक कर पीता है. So I think I'm a bit of a pessimist on this regard. The third thing I was trying to talk about is, therefore, if I'm talking about the NRAF, we have seen how so far all the funding uh, uh, agencies, the public funding agencies have supported research of only certain kind in only certain universities. Okay, or even not universities, also only the research institutions such as CSIR and etc., BARC, CSIR, and so on and so forth. Why don't we have huge research projects not only funded but considered as the flagship of research that has happened in this country, which now these research which come from social sciences? Because I would go ahead and assume the research which may have been in, let's say, social sciences, which is sociology, economic, etc., anthropology, and etc., would be as humongous and significant as what TIFR must be doing, okay, or what any of the IITs has been doing. So why haven't such areas be given sufficient attention and be only biased towards science research. Okay, I come from sciences, but still I'm talking about this because I feel there hasn't been a fair balance. So there, if that is so, probably universities such as Sidhu Kanhu Murmu University may still be in the trailing end, or maybe still in the waiting list queue. Okay, and may or may not be able to also come along where there is supposed to be a hand-holding period that Professor Shakila was mentioning about 15 to 20 years. Even I have been trying to talk about, like, when we have this multilingualism, which is talked about. So to do teacher preparation for schools, let's say if SKMU does not have a department of education, we're preparing teachers to be teaching in the local languages in Santhal Pargana. Who else will do it? But all this will we may start seeing the buds only after 15 to 20 years, and we may not be able to even assess by then. So that is my comment about NRF. My next thing, I think I already talked about these imageries such as Nalanda and all our ancient universities, our university systems. So here I want to respond in using another aspect. See, education in those days, what was it viewed as? Was it only limited to some? Was it only, who availed education there? Did everybody, like today, likes to avail have education? Because today education is for employability, and employability. If if my if my father chose to be a teacher, I and if what prevents me from being a doctor or a lawyer? But on the other hand, if I am a lawyer, would I like if my child becomes a carpenter? So we've got such issues as far as labor is concerned, if I may put it at that level, or dignity of a job is considered. So that is as far as employability. But the second thing that I've been trying to talk about is education for dignity has also been there. Okay, the first one, rozgar ke liye shiksha. Next is izzat ke liye shiksha. And the third point that I want to talk about is, which is rarely mentioned, is are we ready to accept that education is also for nation building? Okay, we seem to just leave that out, and therefore probably have a very myopic view of why certain kind of support may be extended to only certain kind of education. Okay, so with these assumptions, I would like to therefore bring about so therefore, now the scenario of those who want to avail education and therefore access excellence, and there is another thing I talked about generally we talk about, but as far as education is concerned, now it's not as it was in the days of Nalanda, but now it is for all, right? And education quality and no accessibility, this excellence and etc, it's supposed to be for all and no discrimination. Absolutely. Given this, does that imagery help? And so therefore we should be having new imageries, or probably certain other imageries also, or do these other imageries also have space here to be examples? Because if the tribal knowledge system and those are still considered to be primitive and would not have that equal dignity, probably certain areas in our country, and especially I mean, I'm trying to be very, very, I've sort of internalized it, but then I feel that areas of our universities in Santhal Pargana would never have a motivation to even come close to doing the best and aspiring for excellence. Yeah, so let me come to my last but one point, which was about technology. It was so wonderful to hear Professor Shakila mention about how AI, machine learning, and other things a tool for in education, because I think the history of technology and education goes back a long way, when even the charts were used and other things, sandbox and things. Some of us may have been, at least I studied in my first standard, we learned mathematics outside the classroom and never on the blackboard, because we used pebbles to get the addition, subtraction, and even the multiplication and division. Okay, so those were the tools. Now, but that right now, these days, now technology is only become synonym to ICT. So is education across the board, from school, higher education, and professional and others, to what extent technology, this ICT technology, is going to be pervasive and would prevail? Okay, because we do recognize how distance education became a necessity, and we've got universities also, such as IGNU, who from the period of era of sending course materials to the students, then moved to television based delivery of content. And now COVID, all of us have turned to the digital platforms for keeping our students engaged. But the bottleneck is the connectivity, internet connectivity. So to what extent of education would the digital platform and should become essential or not? That must be a prudent question. That must be a prudent question and should have a sincere answer for areas such as Jharkhand, before the policies and let's say guidelines. Okay, yeah, this is what I wanted to mention. Like, now, certain things may come as guidelines from bodies such as HECI, but should they be given the role of imposing certain things at the cost of autonomy of the university? So that has been envisaged in the policy. Okay, so should such bodies be doing arm twisting and then resort to coercive methods? So there should be a good balance and scope for limiting the roles of bureaucracy over the autonomy of the university. For now, autonomy, that is academic autonomy, not the financial autonomy, but academic autonomy. And but then hand in hand must go the commitment of the state, or let's say government. It could be the central and the state government both, but in general state, to not to continue to support the education, and especially higher education. Because you see, when I talk about higher education, and especially like the state of Jharkhand, where poverty, the population percentage of population in general under poverty line is 41.6%. This is as per the 2011 census and 66 NSSO data. Uh, in Jharkhand and in STs it is 51.5%. Okay, and so that's about the poverty line data. Now, about literacy rate, where among STs, the general literacy rate is 57 point some percent, of which amongst male it is 68.2% and females is 46.2%. Okay, so this is the kind of diverse and this is the kind of scenario the data is speaking. Now, what is the input coming to higher education? Of if 100 boys join at class grade 1, as far as 11 data said, 2011 data said, only 15.3 boys completed class 12. So this is the percentage which is going to come to of the STs, who are 26.4% in Jharkhand, are going to come to higher education. Okay, I need to be mindful of that when I try to make certain responses. And the girls, it is very disheartening. It's only 12.3% girls who would have enrolled in grade 1 are passing out with class 12. Now, this is the input. So let's say we are going to have only 14 or 13 or point something to be the ST input, which is coming to higher education. And, so I think there needs to be adequate emphasis and commitment, not only the percentage 0.69% of the GDP. I would like to make it into 10. Why isn't that minimum 6%, which was committed in the beginning, or even go ahead to 10% of the? Why should it be GDP? Shouldn't it be that of the budget? So I'm not an economist, but I understand there is a difference. So these indicate the intention, the sincerity of the state towards you making education an equalizer. And now, if there isn't adequate attention to this, the state of Jharkhand would have a lot of difficulties, especially in higher education, because talk about technology. Just to conduct online exams or online offline blended mode exams for the terminal semesters, when we sent out the survey, 92% did not respond because they did not have access. Okay, and those who responded, only 4% or 5% said they had good and average connectivity. So this is the kind of bottleneck we have in the state like Jharkhand, and where unless the state is committed to making the internet access, or let's say the first the step zero for making ICT a technology or a tool for education would be to have seamless connectivity in all geographical regions, so that tomorrow if such a lockdown again happens a second time, like Canada and other developed countries, who the day they declared lockdown were distributed laptops to the students as well as teachers. So even today, if the connectivity is ensured, I'm sure Professor Panda and I would be the first ones to go ahead and find funds that each student gets at least one smartphone. Today, not all students have smartphone, and those who have smartphone also do not have connectivity. And therefore, before going ahead and laying out the entire grid, it's called education grid, for in various states, I think it is also necessary to see whether there'll be they can be a real component in enabling component in higher education and education or not, but in so doing, I think it is important to see, it is important to uh, check whether these would be an equalizer or the dividers. And therefore, I think with these concerns, which I take with me as the homework for me, since I'm here for 3 years, so try to see as to what are the concerns which we can start responding to, what are the issues which are doable, and as Professor Shakila had mentioned, what are the kinds of studies and research which needs to be done in Jharkhand. And I think some of us are trying to take some of these initiatives because we think certain aspects, the richness of areas such as Santhal Pargana or areas of Jharkhand have long been ignored and need to be brought to the academic platforms, so that it is at least brought to the national scenario before it also goes off to the international scenarios. So with these words, I would like to thank the organizers. I would like to thank each one of you for listening to me. And I really would like to continue to interact with Professor Shakila, because as she comes from education and I have the technology. Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to have this one last word about AI and machine learning. AI and machine learning is only based on the patterns which prevail. So, but then it give out the from the pattern. Okay, and so I mean, if I consider the state like Jharkhand or universities such as Sidhu Kanhu Murmu University, which does not fit into the pattern, all the tools and techniques based on AI and machine learning are not going to cover and will not be able to cater to learners in these areas, and also even the teachers. And I'm trying to say this with a lot of authority, because since 1993 at least I have been teaching artificial intelligence, but all my research students work on machine learning. So at least with because of that experience, I can say this with a lot of responsibility and authority. But outrightly going ahead and using some of these terms, considering the diversity of Indian, the state of states like Jharkhand, and the diversity in our country, I think it will be a very, very premature even dream to see, because I think we have a lot of other steps which should steps to be taken before education at the school level becomes an equalizer. And I think thereafter we can definitely use AI and machine learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. I invite Dr. Partha Das to propose the vote of thanks, and then we can conclude.
On behalf of the IQAC XITE, I am feeling honored and lucky. Very special day. I particularly liked our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kolhan University, Professor Gangadhar speech, where he has thrown light on that crystal clear picture of 5+3+3+4 system and the grading pattern, and all thrown on light on the multiple entry and exit in the system. There is no words to say thanks to our resource person, Dr. Shakila Shamsu, Department of Higher Education, MHRD. The long path of the three-tier education policies, that is 1968, 1986, and 2020. The whole 66 pages policy, she has shortened down to only the 4 pillars of learning, that is learning to know, learning to do, learning to live with others, and learning to be. All of education system focusing on students and teachers to skills and attitude. And it's a very important step that 22 principles of learning by children focus centuries. Also, the flexible HI clusters into only the 3 part, that is research universities, teacher education universities, and the autonomous degree granting colleges. Our very clear picture given by all the students and the listeners. We know where we are and where we be. Our next person, Professor Sonjharia, means Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sidhu Kanhu University, enlightened the hope that ancient Nalanda University education system can be replicated in Jharkhand. Beside all the constraints, we hope that the glory will again flourish in through all the universities. And ma'am, you have given the focus on the education for dignity. Next, I am giving a special thanks to our chairperson, Father Nelson SJ from XLRI, for hosting the webinar and smoothly run through the whole function. Gratitude to the Director XLRI of Administration XLRI for their kind support. I also convey my thanks to the audience and participants for showing team and making up the knowledge for their future. I'd like to thank our people for the Francis H.A. as the IQS chairperson and all the teachers and staff members of the college for making this webinar success. Last but not the least, I thank the Almighty God for ushering the blessings to all of us for keeping sound health and mind. Once again, thanks one and all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Partha. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this webinar. I hope those who participated and listened found insights. And this is merely the beginning. We have to take it forward and continue to personalize it so that we can apply as educators in the society and bring that novelty, that change, which is envisaged by the new education policy to build a better India, to build a more educated, a more beautiful India, and contribute to the lives of our students. Thank you. God bless you and have a good day. Keep yourself safe.